Good morning, Sal. Hi, Sal. Steve Whitaker. Can you facilitate quick release of the contract because you've approved it? So it should be released already, if not prior. But I shouldn't have to wait till Monday or Tuesday to get it. Or Kelly, if you're listening.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good. My sound is working.
Did somebody
looking pretty chipper, considering.
Does that mean like have been fed through the chipper?
At least you all made it to the office. It looks like Ben and I like barely just rolled out of bed. Abby's sleeping late. I'm so that I can't. I need like serious sleep.
Yeah.
The electrician is at our house this morning. It's starting at 7, so I was like, I'll be out of there. I'll see you later.
That is incentive. That is incentive. Yeah. Well, it's my husband and my 21st wedding anniversary today, so I'm gonna
Congratulations.
have enough energy to go out to dinner. I told him I would take a nap.
Congratulations. That's really great.
Cool.
That's awesome.
So that is something to celebrate. We're gonna go to Montreal this weekend and
Oh, awesome.
try to find a really fancy, fun place to eat dinner because we like to eat fun food. So.
You know, it's not necessarily fancy, but have you ever been to Schwartz's Deli?
No, I'll write that down. Any recommendation for something fun to do in Montreal? Shorts?
It's Schwartz's. It's an institution. It's like a smoked meat Montreal sandwich. It's like corned beef, pastrami kind of stuff. It's incredible. Line out the door.
That's
but
what my
really
husband
great.
likes. Maybe lunch. Maybe lunch and then on the plateau. Well, thank
Have
So
fun.
are
That'll be a
we,
great time.
we're expecting Stephanie, are we not?
We are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
It's just 8 o'clock. We're early birds.
Can somebody facilitate sharing of that contract now without waiting till next week, since it's been voted on?
So, Steve, I'm happy to make that available, not right this second. I have not signed it this morning, yet, just based on action last night. But I certainly can make it available as soon as possible.
Well, I'm saying possible sooner because I don't care whether it has a signature on it or not. It's been voted on.
So I think we're gonna follow the direction of the chair here and do the work of the committee. But like I said, I'm happy to make it available as soon as possible.
It's possible now. It's about transparency.
Ah, there we are. Stephanie, are you there?
She should be, she's here. She's getting on. Her link is just loading really slow.
Okay.
So she's coming.
Okay, well, I'll call to order since we're all here. You've all seen the agenda. Any changes? Seeing none, we'll approve the agenda. General business and appearances.
Steve Whitaker, I'm just protesting that the contract has not been shared. I can't make informed comments on the impropriety that y'all are engaging in, but you heard from multiple people that the city's procurement policy and even state law require this not to be done in this manner. So y'all are going to barrel ahead anyway. And I'm just creating a record such that the court can review it.
Sal, if I might, I just want to say
Sure.
that the contract is in compliance with the city's procurement policy and also with the state's procurement policy through Bulletin 3.5. So I'll just note that for the record. Thank you.
And I'll note that Kelly's lying.
Steve, I don't really appreciate that, and I'm actually not going to take that assertion. I'm happy to provide the justification for the sole source in writing, and we'll do that.
You needed
But
to do that before. You needed to do that
I'm
before it
actually
was
not going to
voted
go back
on.
and forth. Thanks very much.
I see we have some people have joined us. Carrie has joined us. Matt has joined us. I don't know who PKD is.
This is Phil Dodd.
Oh,
Those
hi,
are my
Phil.
initials. Yeah,
Yeah, hi, Phil. I should have guessed that, huh?
just here to watch.
Okay, welcome. Well, I take it everyone has received the materials from Stephanie.
No, the public has not received any materials. And there was no packet for this available on the website this morning.
The committee has received the materials, I trust.
I request them
And-
immediately. They should be posted in the chat so that links to them should be posted in the chat so that everyone could be informed and make informed public comment at these meetings based on the documents that y'all are reviewing.
Kelly, what's the process for that?
So I would just suggest that when Stephanie is here, we can have her share her screen so that what we're discussing in
Okay.
this meeting can be part of the recording.
All right, that sounds good. Stephanie, it seems to me the best process would be for you to facilitate
Sure.
using your document. So
Happy to share my screen and happy to start us off and make use of this hour.
it should
Whenever
be
you're
noted
ready,
that
Chair.
I think we all got these this morning. I think you sent them out last night, but I doubt anyone had a chance to see it until
Yeah.
this morning.
It was a late one.
Yeah, it
So,
was. Yeah.
and I was just getting all of the subcommittees responses, combined, collaborating them all together. So that's where we are. You want me to go ahead? Do you have any other
please.
protocol? Okay. All right. Good to see you all.
We have just an hour, as I
Yeah.
understand it. So
Correct.
we really need to boogie, I think. Yeah.
Correct. So I'm going to share a different document first. I want to quickly review the timeline and the objectives for this meeting because I think that's important, and specifically talk about the kind of some of the changes that were made based on conversation last week. So as we're discussing this, the point is to get to identify a development partner or partners that could potentially be a good fit for this site and to take the next steps that come with that. And so and one of the pieces of that is to maybe find and secure funding and financing through the CDBG DR grant process. I'm going to pull this screen up here. All right. Can you see my screen? Okay, so this is
Yes,
the
that's
timeline.
it.
We did talk about this last week, but we've made some adjustments. Last week was kind of an overview of the process and the components. This week we're going to discuss, today we're going to discuss the requirements, incentives, materials, and selection criteria that are components of the RFQ. Tomorrow we can kind of pick up where we leave off today, as well as talk about the draft structure and kind of just review the sections. Those are being drafted. The other sections are being drafted by staff and my team to just put together kind of the framework of the whole thing that will then go to you to review in full. And we can discuss the distribution, start discussing the distribution list. And then next week's meetings, it'll be the time to develop the matrix, which is basically a carry forward of the selection criteria that you identify in order to create some sort of judging framework, and then finalize our distribution list. And then we have one more meeting to kind of review everything and your vote to go to the full council. And that's what will get sent to the council in the packet next week, so that it can be voted on at the October 22nd council meeting. That's the full, I just wanted to run through those goals and see if there was any feedback from the subcommittee. Okay. Hearing none.
Pretty ambitious.
Yeah, let's move on. But that's important to just say that what we're doing today is to kind of go through those specifics that you were working on over the last week relative to the components that you want to include in the RFQ. I believe this is the right document. Here we go. So this is what I'm calling the RFP building. And what I did was to kind of start with just isolating the areas of concern that were highlighted by subcommittee members and talk through them as a group. I can kind of respond to some of them with my expertise, and then you can discuss as a subcommittee how you want to take this forward. And then each section, the partnership opportunity incentives, there were some that had clear consensus. There were others that needed to be discussed. Same thing with requirements, what you're requiring of the partner. A couple of things that were clear consensus, a lot of things that were needing to be considered and discussed. Requested information from developers, a lot of consensus there, not much to discuss, but a little bit. And selection criteria, same thing, a lot of consensus, some to discuss. Okay, so that's the general flow I'd like to pursue, because I think it'll keep us on track as much as possible. I don't think we're probably going to get through all of it today. I think we do need to continue this tomorrow. So areas of concern. So one of the, there's a few different components that folks have raised, which is, what is the vision that the city wants to include in this document? And what does we have it identified as what is the developer's consistency and understanding of the city's goals? So how do we define that vision? And my sense from what I had understood when I came into this was that the discussion and decisions out of the spring were the places to point them to as the vision. It's kind of a, as we've said, a loose vision, but it's a vision. I'm not going to guide that and make that decision for the subcommittee. That's just what I wanted to leave it. That's what I was envisioning when I said, what is the vision, to point them to that spring decision.
So
Stephanie, just
you'll
to
be
clear,
looking.
sorry.
Go ahead, Ben.
No, to clarify, right? You're talking about, through the actionable plan that you folks put together, there was, I believe it was option A or attachment A, that then this, a similar subcommittee to this one went back and we removed renderings of different housing types and broke it into site constraints and buildable areas, right? And so you're saying that, that's what you're talking about when you say
yes,
vision.
I am. Yep, that's right.
Yeah, okay, and we did that deliberately to to leave it more flexible. So.
Okay. So this was to respond to some of your concerns, Adrian. So I just wanted to make sure that you were, if we, refer to consistency with the town's vision, do you have maybe wordsmithing that would make it a little bit more kind of relatable to what the work was in the spring that would be helpful?
So, I mean, the vision we came up with in the subcommittee to have low, medium, and I think high density housing, which was those bubbles, right? So that to me is not a vision. Like a vision to me is our values. And, for me, I don't think we're on the same page, right? So for me, when I think about this property, this is what I think about. This is like what's in my soul and what makes me happy and what I want this property to look like. From a background in, public health, I've worked with communities around the world designing healthy communities. So you can build a community focused on health. And so that means, smart growth of for me, the vision is a neighborhood that's multi-generational. It is walkable, bikeable, not necessarily reliable on cars. There's community centers, so connectiveness is a number one priority for me. So as you age, connectiveness is one of the variables that helps you live a healthy, long life. Access to healthy foods through gardens and, ways for people to connect in town centers and, markets and, whatever the business side would be, because it is a very small community. But I think for me, that's a vision and my value. And I think, yes, we have this map that has these bubbles, but I want to ensure we weave in, concepts of smart growth. And I know you're going to say we don't want to be over prescriptive because we don't want to limit the amount of responses, but I think we have to have a balance so that we do attract the right developers to build on this land. And so that's what I just want to have that fabric, to weave in throughout this RFP process to ensure that, and I don't know, maybe you're all like, no, I don't want that. That's so stupid. Like,
No, Adrian,
I don't know.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree. Here's the process piece of that I think how we can reconcile this, which is in the 9-month long, actionable plan building community process, there was no completely standout values that everybody shared. Like the council did not adopt anything that had that kind of framework. And that was because there was no consensus in the community. And part of the responses, as I've been thinking back, because it's been, 2+ years, and, I'm a mom of 2 small kids, so my memory isn't that long at the moment. But, thinking back to their responses, a lot of people were frustrated and did not want to provide any of that guidance because they didn't have something to respond to, which was really interesting, right? Because now we're kind of in this moment of like, it's just so chicken and egg, right? So what I'm hearing from you is the will to want to have something like going value driven, which I completely am in support of. And we don't yet have anything for people to actually respond to that could be viable in the market too. Like, there's a lot of things that we might want that just don't actually pencil out. So what I suggest is, as part of your RFP process, not RFQ, but RFP, once the proposals are in, is there a component in there, once you have some actual proposals out, where you can do a community forum and can get some buy-in around what do these represent in terms of what we want and how does that align with, and it's not just what these 3 counselors, but the whole council and the community. Does that seem like maybe it could weave the 2 together? And we can put that in the RFQ that, hey, forthcoming, there's going to be a community component within the RFP process.
Yeah, I mean, I think that feels good. I just, I just want to make sure that we do, and I don't know how that falls within this timeline, right? So we have such a short
That's doable.
timeline.
No, that's
Okay.
doable. That's doable.
So I think
it's weaving it like it's getting calls in so we can get the funnel going, we
Okay.
can get the thing started. And then once we get into the RFP, that's where the real work's going to really get in. And we've got 5 qualified, interesting proposals to think about. And they may very much differ in that way that you're talking about. Like they may have different priorities. One may be more prioritizing density, one may be more prioritizing walkability, one may be prioritizing rec, you know, so how does the community feel about that?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just want to make sure we do weave in that community input because I feel like that, I mean, I participated in your sessions a couple years ago and I feel like that piece was missing. And you're right, there was nothing to respond to. And I don't think there was, the facilitation of what is the vision. And, we have been doing the vision Montpelier and I've talked to hundreds of people and over the past couple weeks. And I think our community would have a vision. I think we just need to work on that a little bit. So this is our community, right? It'll be our neighborhood. And I want to make sure we build something that's long lasting and sustainable and really beautiful. That's
Well,
my,
the way I describe it and that has resonated with the people I talk to about it is that we want a neighborhood, not a series of subdivisions. It's a very broad sort of concept, but I think everybody has their own idea of what a neighborhood is, but they know it involves the concept of neighbors, of connectedness, of access. It's general, but I'm hoping that from the developer side, it will provide something that the community can respond to, which I agree was lacking last time. Well, my fear was that they responded to concept A literally with the placement of those little boxes, and what they need is a series of developers' concepts of where those boxes, how they connect, where they're placed,
Right.
And who occupies them. So
Right.
I'm looking forward to that part of it.
Totally. And the inherent contradiction is, or, in the process is just that you can't get the developers in without having done what you did in the first place, to get the due diligence done. So one of the things about that though, I just have to put out the disclaimer is that when we put this in the RFP and we let people know during the RFQ process that this is forthcoming, just be advised that there will be folks that don't want to propose because they don't want to, that's too much for them. Now that may be okay by you because they might not be the right partner for Montpelier if they're not willing to be part of the, to embed themselves within that process. But that could, bring down the number of responses you get if people know that they have to then get this vetted through a values process community-wide, and how long will that be? So it's something to think about. And I can do a little bit of homework and a little bit of thinking on how we describe it in the RFQ. And then during the RFP, we'll have to get really specific about what does that, because they need to know what's the decision-making process. They're gonna be putting thousands of dollars into the work that they do for the proposal. So that's why we also limit it to 5, in case you were wondering about the 5, is because they need to know they're not gonna be one of 30 to be considered. They're putting thousands of dollars into it. So they need to know that they have a shot, if they're, selected to respond. They need to know that.
Well, yeah, the community engagement process is something we need to pay attention to. Adrian, your hand is up.
So just quickly, I know our topic for tomorrow is the developer list. And so I think, putting some extra due diligence I did a ton of research on developers, not necessarily in Vermont, but there are some organizations and groups that we could add to listservs to distribute this RFP to a wider audience and network. And so I just want to make sure that we think about that, maybe we have to go a little extra and reach out to some folks that might not be, I don't know if they're on your list, Stephanie, I don't know, but we can cross check and, maybe reach out to those specific developers that have designed these neighborhoods around the country. And some of them are in the Northeast, they're on the list I sent, and, we can look at them and even make some phone calls, right? Whatever you tell us to do in that world,
Exactly. Yeah.
kind of make those extra
Totally. I think that's
Effort.
the right call. And so that kind of actually is a nice dovetail to the next topic of developers focused on profit. This is your chance to open that funnel and then to work on, again, you have the decision-making power here as you take the next step.
Stephanie, could I just,
mhm.
sorry, just real quick, Sal, if I could just make a comment too on the
Yeah.
values. Like, I do think there are some, Adrian, when you're describing your values around connectivity, walkability, community-based and health, like, I think even through the RFQ process, right, we can signal that, right? That like, Montpelier is seeking to create a, neighborhood for the future, right? One in which neighbors are connected, living healthy, right? Like, I think those kinds of value statements we can make. And then I would also just reflect on the fact that there was, I believe, community consensus around, what was the purpose of buying this property, right? Was the three goals of, housing, recreation, and land conservation, right? So like just the play between those three things, I think, becomes a frame through which we think about what is the vision, that we want to respond to or be a part of. Thanks. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no, thanks. By the way, let me just remind people, I consider this to be a working session. So if we start talking over each other, I'll interrupt. But if you have something to say, just start saying it and we'll manage, because we need to keep moving.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
So I'm going to jump down to the next one, which is the planning and the due diligence. And so that was a question that a few of you shared around, how do it's a kind of a sequencing question, and the how and when to analyze certain things such as traffic and secondary access. How do we talk about brownfield? I will point out that the brownfield phase 1 was done during the actionable master plan. So you already have that information. It is not considered still viable. They expire after a certain amount of time. If you were to, before closing, they would need to do their own and so forth. But we know where the areas are of contamination based on that phase 1, and there would need to be a phase 2. And so it's more than likely that this property is in the umbrella program. And so that does give you access to funding. And so I think the signal in the RFQ is, working collaboratively toward, remediation. We can't commit to how we're going to do that yet, because that will depend on the phase 1 and the phase 2. That's the kind of negotiation that happens during a due diligence period between a buyer and a seller. That the buyer does a phase 1 and phase 2. And then if they come back with, oh, okay, there's actually a ton of contamination, you renegotiate the purchase price, for example. So you renegotiate terms after that. So that's going to come, that's a step. And then the traffic and secondary access, again, we've done plenty to understand what the capacity limits are of that intersection down on Route 2 for now. But again, without knowing what the volume is of this, especially phase 1, because potentially phase 1 is one small discrete project that's going to get built, that will get the ball rolling, that'll get you the right developer partners so that you can get the funding to be able to do the infrastructure, the first big chunk of infrastructure, and you won't need a secondary access for that. And so you can continue to do the due diligence on a concurrent track. So again, I urge you to not promise that as necessarily part of your next phase, but put it out there that, that will be one of the steps that has to come forward with your partner once you see the development design and plan. Again, you don't want to trap yourself into something that you're not willing to do yet. So just leave it open.
I just want to, I'm sorry,
yeah.
This is Matt. I just want to add to what you just said, because once there are new properties built, the dynamic of that entire strip of Route 2 is going to change. And once the business community realizes, oh, there's potentially new clients here, then there may be new stores, there may be, it's not just this housing and the number of units that's going to impact the traffic. It's going to be a myriad of other things that we don't have any way of predicting yet. And so the traffic study is something that will have to evolve and emerge as time goes on, as things change in the community.
Thanks, Matt.
Mm-hmm. So the other question around that planning and due diligence was this term offsite improvements. I agree. I don't think that should be, personally, that was just a list of the menu of options that you could include and is often done. And you probably saw in the Dorset example. I don't think we should do that because we don't know what's going to be required. If they proposed the full 300,000, or 300 unit, layout or something, we may want to require that they do offsite improvements. Can mean a lot of things. It could include a transit component. It could include, so you don't want to, I don't want to discourage them from applying based on scale. And I want to know we don't want to say yes or no at that point. So I don't think it's a good one to include in this project in particular. So I'm kind of recommending taking that off the table. Just leave it be. And if they know that they're going to have they know what they're doing. If they're going to come in with something, they're going to say, oh, we know we're going to have to do that offsite improvement. Usually offsite improvements are things like traffic improvements that are beyond the immediate proximity of the property, or potential acquisitions of right-of-ways beyond the property lines. And again, we just won't know that until we have a development plan in front of us.
I was thinking the same thing when I saw that. I didn't know what the scope of it
Yeah.
usually is, but it seemed to me a little premature at
Yeah,
this
let's
point,
just take it
so.
off. I agree. The financial analysis, this gets to Adrian's questions from before too, and I just want to and some of these were shared by your subcommittee peers. So specifically around the infrastructure amount, I don't think we need to specify an amount specifically about infrastructure that we're committing to. Rather, I would say that you can say what you're going to be applying for in terms of the bond, like what's available, and say up to, potentially up to pending, with lots of contingencies. You're applying for CDB, GDR, catalyst that could total X number of dollars, just so they have an idea of what you're thinking of in terms of commitment, and then specifying, pending the development plan CHIP, and they can run the numbers in their mind about what CHIP could cover, because they know, well, they don't probably know the exact formula because no one knows the exact formula yet, but that's how I would recommend putting it. And that's what I've got in the recommendations down below. I think I talked a little bit about this at the council meeting last night, but in terms of protecting the city, you're not bound to anything. This is iterative. So it's a step-by-step. You've got lots of decision points and off ramps until it's time to make an actual commitment to a developer. So there will be financial analysis before you do that. And the end goal of my contract that gets to this point is an LOI. And so during that phase, it's going to be looking at the financials that they have, trying to verify that they are a good financially solid partner. And that'll be a component of your RFP process. So that's how you evaluate the finances. I will say my number one advice to municipalities in a public-private partnership is to 100% vet your partner as if they are doing business with you, that you're opening up a restaurant together. They need to open up their books to you. They need to show you what this looks like. What's their pro forma, what's their sources and uses, how are they putting this together? Because if you're an investor, that's what they would do. And you're an investor in the public infrastructure and the land. So that's how we recommend going forward. Let's see, this question of the rental market, it's a good question. Rental units are considered commercial property. They are owned by an entity that does the leasing, and so that is a taxable property. It's a commercial for-profit entity, so it is taxed like any other commercial property, and so that then goes to the tax base, to the grand list, and that's how it pays back CHIP or TIF. I don't know how the rental unit, the money of that, I mean, how big the scale of the rental units in the building and how that's valued by the assessor, how that would look, is going to dictate how much you can afford with CHIP or TIF to do infrastructure. So that is the formula and the model that we have to run. So I won't know that until later.
Yeah, I just want to I think one of the concerns that I hear a lot in the community is the idea of the affordability component to the project, right? And the assessed value of affordable units versus market rate units, right?
Yes,
and so
yes, I see.
really
Yes.
that kind of that mix, right? And will the subsidized units create enough tax revenue to, cash flow the infrastructure through the CHIP or the TIF? And so Can you just talk a little bit more about like how that assessment comes out in the proposal and
Yeah.
what that like negotiation process looks like?
And that's a really good point. And you have a really good example in your neighbor in Berry City, who just got approval from BEPC for the Seminary Street Affordable Housing Project that's going before the voters in a few weeks. So what that means, it is a little bit confusing. So in a typical CHIP or TIF project, what you do is you have let's say it's 30 units of rental, rental units. That is calculated by the assessor as a commercial property. There's 30 apartments. It's valued at whatever it's valued at. If they're affordable, there's a statutory formula that dictates what it is assessed at and what they pay taxes on. So Downstreet pays taxes based on a state formula. So in a CHIP or TIF district, you have to have what's called a development agreement. And in the development agreement, there is something called the minimum taxable value. And this is a really important piece, like the number one most important piece of a development agreement, because it says that the developer is on the hook to pay taxes on their property that will cover the debt service in the time you need it to. And that's the taxpayer's security, and why these tax bonds, these TIF bonds succeed, like the votes succeed, because we've told them that whether or not the developer has even done the development, they have to pay the taxes on that future value. So it's really interesting because it says, hey, you said you would build this multifamily building and it would be worth $5 million in 2029, and you have to start paying taxes on that, whether or not you built it in the amount of time or at that scale, because we've put in the infrastructure that we have debt service for that's going to require that increment. So that's the important mechanism within a development agreement that protects the taxpayer. Now, so now keep that in mind when I say there's this affordable housing statutory requirement that caps how and defines how that can be assessed. And what it means is that you really can't have a minimum tax payment, taxable value. You can't do that mechanism. So in Berry, because Berry is a old, like seasoned, mature TIF district, they actually didn't need it. They didn't need to secure the increment because they already had sufficient cash flow from the TIF district to pay their debt service. And it was a pretty small bond. So that we didn't have to put that in there because Downstreet and Evernorth said that we'll never get that passed. I mean, there's no minimum. We can't. I mean, what if the legislature decides to change that formula in 5 years and say, you don't need to pay any more taxes on affordable housing units? That's their purview. And now they're locked into some agreement with the city that says they still have to pay this amount. That doesn't work. So we released them from that component in that case because they had the increment. In this case, you'd have to factor that in. If there's not enough increment, there's not enough increment. If you have a fully affordable property, it may not generate the same amount of increment, and you're taking some risk because you don't know how that statutory formula will change. So affordable housing projects in TIF districts are trickier.
So how does this affect the CDBG grant requirement for 70%?
Right.
Affordable within a certain range. I think it's 80% of AMI.
Right. I'm pretty sure it's a blend, right? I haven't done the math on it, but I mean, it doesn't have to be entirely capital A affordable units. And so there's a component of them that wouldn't meet that definition. So what would you yield for the increment without that? And
as a phased project, it would be spread across phases, as I understand it. And is it project specific, or are they talking about the total HUD funding is calculated based on all of the housing generated through that funding, not just the projects of Montpelier or Barry, but all of that? Do you know how that works?
I'm not the DR specialist, so that may be a Matt or a Kelly question. Sorry, I don't know.
I would just say, Sal, I heard the same thing, right?
Yeah.
That like even, that the project is going to be more competitive the closer it is to the 70%. 70%, but that, you know, you could have a project. It's really their whole portfolio of CBG DDR funds and that 70% benchmark.
And so that's what we'll have to evaluate. I mean, that's the other thing, right? Like, you know, different sources, projects of, excuse me, projects of this scale often have multiple funding sources, and each funding source has a different driving purpose. So there's another project I'm working on right now that has one funding source that is really economic development driven and one funding source that is drinking water driven. And the drinking water doesn't care if new business is created. And the economic development does care about drinking water quality, but not as much. And so we have two different sources of money. And so every time we're pitching the full project, it's doing both, but we have to emphasize one part of the story for each funder. And so similarly, you could look at this and say, okay, well, the CDBG DR money is actually going to give us more infrastructure money than TIF or CHIP would. And TIF or CHIP won't give us as much because it's a much more, you know, it's got much more affordable housing and it won't generate as much increment. So we can't layer them together, or we can, but we can only layer them in a certain amount. So it's all about the levers you can pull in different ways.
And I guess the fundamental thing that I'm asking here is, right, like through the RFP process,
Yeah,
we need to have a project to evaluate so people can start to like pull which levers will work to make the thing pencil out, and maybe find that it doesn't, right? But
right.
Unless we have a project proposed, we can't really do that.
Well, that's right. And then we do have, this was to one of your questions, the group's questions. I have it here somewhere. It might be down here. So we can come back to this in a minute, but it does say there's a definition that I think was even in the Dorset one. We've used it in others, but you know, you could say that you are looking for workforce affordable housing, and it's defined as housing affordable to the middle income households between 65 and 150. And there is a matrix in the VHFA that's updated every year. So you can use the 2025 for Washington County of rents and purchase prices for middle income and workforce. So that could be a guide, if that's a helpful guide for you. Okay, so based on that, I'm going to keep going because what I've got here is the sections where we're going to develop this RFQ that has a partnership opportunity section, and we break it out into what, you know, city's going to give you, developer, and developer, what do you need to give us? So three areas of consensus. Talk about infrastructure. That's the consensus, is mention that the city is willing to be a partner in infrastructure. I suggest writing out what some of those possibilities might be, such as, now without promising anything. This is just simply a list to get them thinking like, we know what we've taught. It gives them the sense that we know enough about our own property and the limitations and constraints there to understand where your pain points might be. And so therefore, you know, it just says possibly, and then to be determined in partnership, and pending these two funding pots, and then list the two funding pots. What are the upper limits of those two funding pots? Which Kelly and I can, you know, get to. I think Mike has the numbers there, but I can't remember if you were going for the 3 million catalyst or 1 million or, you know, CDBGR.
So it's 3 million for the Northern Border Catalyst, and then it's 4.2 for the
4.2.
DR.
So perfect. So, you know, we can say that, like, you know, okay, say like up to, you know, something like that, right? And that way it just gives them a sense of what we're willing to apply for in partnership. And then access to bike path. City will help convene state, federal business resources. You know, these are things that you can bring to the table that a private developer wouldn't normally have the opportunity to get by themselves. Again, that's the difference, right? Like they're looking at, I can buy this piece of property over here in this other town, or I could buy this property, you know, I can partner with the city and do a project over here. And if I could do a project over here with the city, these are the things that'll make it easier for me. And these are the things that'll make it more constrained. And they're looking at that alternative always. That's just the way that development works. So then the others to consider would be, do you want to offer a discounted purchase price? And that you should be putting this stuff up front. Do you want to offer it as a dollar sale, which is usually your biggest selling point? It's the thing that's going to attract the most folks to the table, because again, we know that the numbers are insanely tight. And so if you want other bells and whistles, bringing down that land cost is your first line of generosity, I guess. And then you could consider doing a waiver water sewer hookup fees waiver, and you could consider discounting municipal permits. Those are all options for you. You also, do you have tax stabilization policy in Montpelier?
We do.
You do? That's an option for you. I'm not suggesting you have to do it, but one way to do this, by the way, is you could structure it that you could be a little cagey if you wanted to and say, make me an offer. Like, let them come back to you with, all right, we propose $1 purchase price, and we, ask that our things be waived, and we ask that this be discounted by this amount, and they could propose a tax stabilization structure too. But again, they're just proposing it. It's it's just one way for them to start putting their numbers together, and then we run the numbers and say, well, okay, you can't have tax stabilization and TIF or CHIP, which you can. Just so you know, you can do tax stabilization and TIF together. It just reduces the amount you have for TIF, but sometimes that's the right lever. And, you can ask them what's going to work for them. And so maybe you just put it in this as almost like this exact thing, like the city would consider these things without promising them.
Stephanie, I'm confused or have questions about the idea of, are we talking about what part of this property does the city maintain, right? I mean, are we talking, are you suggesting like 133 acres, or we're talking about the initial site, right? And then there's kind of like more incremental development, right? Like, I'm just curious about how we're balancing that.
Should be down here in the requested information. Developers should indicate whether they're interested in developing the entire project or only a portion of the project. And yeah, I agree. Which do you want to limit that from the top? Say, okay, just this, eastern portion or western portion. Yeah, the buildable areas that are
That's what I was
indicated.
thinking. Yeah.
And then give them the further option that they don't have to propose for all the buildable areas, that they could propose for less than all
That's
of them.
really, that's kind of what I'm,
Is that the will of the subcommittee?
I think that's included. That was an item on the list. I don't know how much consensus there was on it, but we asked whether we would ask whether they were interested in developing all of the buildable areas or just some of them. Yeah.
So do you want, so we want to limit it to buildable areas. That makes sense. I mean, don't ask them to propose things on the rec sites. And then of those buildable areas, do they want all or some, right? Okay. I'm going to make this as a note for myself so that I can, no, that note is not going to be the way it's written finally, but I'm going to put that in there. Okay. So in terms of this here, do you want to leave these as kind of loose options that they could come back and propose to us?
Can I just ask about what you've been seeing communities do? And I mean, we've had experiences here in Montpelier where we've tried to offer up a lot and did not put a dollar price on it, didn't get any response.
Yeah.
Do you feel, does it send a signal if we say $1 that is more powerful than saying like, just make us an offer?
Yes. Yes. Because they have a little more certain. The biggest thing you can offer is certainty and predictability to a developer. The more certainty, the more predictability, the better, tighter deal you're going to get in a proposal you're going to get. So I would highly urge a $1 purchase price, because that's your strongest, that's the biggest give you can do at this point without, you're not going to sacrifice the value piece, the values, not value, but values piece of it by doing that. And you bring down that barrier right up front. And then, hookup fees, they're not a lot of money in the scale of this. And it could be, it's another solid way you can commit. Discounted permits. Just say discounted. Doesn't have to say by how much at this stage, but that gives them also just one more, it shows cooperation. You're sending a signal. We are a city who's ready to have a partner who is doing a project that's in our best interest, but we have aligned interests. So my recommendation, I'll just put here, is $1 waived, and whoops, right, and I didn't get enough sleep last night. Sorry, I'm not.
So you're recommending including all of these in a general sort of non-specific way, yeah. Like other than the dollar, the $1.
I would do the dollar. I would do the
Yeah.
dollar and the waived. Those are a little more certain, and then
Mhm.
keep these more general. That would be my recommendation.
I'll just jump in, and Kelly, maybe you know this. So if I'm just trying to put my like developer hat on, which I've never worn before, but I've put it on.
Looks great.
And I, why would I want to work in Montpelier? Like what is the history of Montpelier? What have been some historical barriers in Montpelier for development? And, making sure maybe these are them, but I just want to say, let's really think about, what could we do to entice a developer that may have worked or may have wanted to work in Montpelier, but hit a roadblock. Like, I don't know what they may be. I just want to like dig really deep to make sure we're not blindsided or missing some really important incentive that, to entice that developer.
Thank you. That's a good point, because I think that's something that you all can answer better than I can, because you know Montpelier better. But one of the other pieces where you can do that, Adrian, and I think one of the things that you'd bring to the next phase of this is when you write the background section and the other section of this RFQ, that's your chance to tell your story, the good, the bad, the ugly, if you want. And so just be thinking about that. And when you get that document, that might be a good place to start that. But the incentive piece, I agree with too. What are the barriers?
Like, is there anything having to do, I mean, this is outside of my area of expertise. So is there anything else like with zoning or like, I mean, I really have no idea. I'm just trying to think of things that,
I think, Adrian, it's a great question, and I think like there are things that apply to like all housing in Vermont, right? In terms of like not penciling out, right? And so, that $1 thing I think makes sense probably in whatever community you're in, but then like what are the Montpelier specific things that I think that deserves a better dive? But I do think like the zoning has already been changed for the site to make this kind of development happen. That's my understanding.
Yep.
And just to weigh in really quick, so I did make a note of it. We will do a deeper dive when we get into the background, just to make sure that it's clearly identified, sort of like what we're looking for. And then to that point, too, about the zoning, just making sure that we are sort of establishing within the document what we've done to make, this site ready.
and
Yeah,
I'll just say it's not, we still have a process to go through, but one of the big things is appeals. So I know we're working on that. And I think that's something that potentially could, just the history of Montpelier. I want to make sure we're upfront and we're working through that I don't know what that may look like. I know we're working on that to put it on the agenda, but I want to make sure that we do attract developers and we're working with our neighbors, right? So appeals is a big issue in Montpelier, just due to NIMBYism. And so I want to make sure that, I don't
Yeah.
want that to just deter a developer, because we know that's the case and we're working to resolve that.
I think that's a good point. And also it leads me to thinking about Act 250, and that, getting this to be in the tier 1A is going to be huge. It's just a big component that would add a lot of predictability for a developer, to know that they weren't, going to have to go through those additional steps when there's already been so much protection added to this site from the local process as well as the due diligence. I also want to point out, back to your point, just one more before, about the Montpelier specific barriers. That's also something we may learn during the qual process. Like in my, conversations with folks, they may tell me, hey, I saw it, but I'm not interested, and we may follow up and we can find out why. And that could potentially lead to, if we got no responses, a revised RFQ, right? So, okay. We should move forward. The co-applicant on state permits was one option, or the developer is responsible for all their own state and local permits. I advise doing being a co-applicant, because I think that does send a stronger message.
I agree.
Yeah, I'd like that idea too. I was just curious.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that I understood exactly what
No,
that meant.
obviously definitely worth something. Yep. Great. All right, now we have just enough time probably for requirements, and then we'll tackle the other two sections tomorrow. So
Wow,
we
10
are,
over.
what's that?
My, how time flies. It's already
It
10
does,
up.
it does.
Yeah.
So here, we already said we want them to tell us of the buildable areas, which ones do they want? Are they thinking about the proposed, these are the ones that we have consensus, the proposed, these are kind of obvious ones that everybody should already do, barrier free with pedestrian access, and buildings should be compliant. That you'd think it would be obvious, but you have to say it. You really have to say it. It's kind of a
Okay.
boilerplate, but it's for your own best interest. Okay, this section, I don't even think we're going to get through this in this session. I don't know, but you have these options here of people's contributions. So I'll leave it to you to discuss this. But these were put on the table by you all. Are there any that stand out that you definitely want included that makes
Well,
sense?
I mean, I think that the recreation component is important. I mean, that was
Yep.
driving factor in the purchase of the property. I think it it needs to be clear that we expect there to be a mix of housing and recreation there, and the developers need to acknowledge that in their proposals. So exactly.
Do you get to that by just limiting it to the buildable areas though?
That was
Does that
my
kind of get
question.
the same?
Well, yeah, I don't know. We might.
Maybe that gets to it at the same way, because what I worry about here is that it says preservation of playing fields, but you've already established where the buildable areas are. So I think it's saying the same thing. I don't think there's any damage done by taking this. The fewer requirements you have, it's going to look, it's going to feel better. So why don't we limit it to the buildable areas? And then if they come back with something that's clearly beyond those areas that does compromise the playing fields and rec areas, I fear that this is a little vague and people might not quite understand what that means.
Mm-hmm. Well,
versus
yeah.
Start with the buildable areas and build
one
out.
of the buildable areas is in the flattest part of the property. That's the highest density, as it turns out. So I just wanted them to be aware of those goals and see if they can work around it while acknowledging the need for it's the last flat non-floodable property we've got. So
what's the will of the committee then? Do we leave this in and the other, or just the other, or neither?
I mean, I would take it out because we've got the buildable area.
The word preservation might not be.
Sal, I don't know, but I would. Yeah, I think the goal maybe you could outline that goal more in the kind of framing document in terms of like one of the great assets of this property is the opportunity to actually blend outdoor recreation with the development of the housing, right? And so frame it that way of like,
well, that might be a better way to say it than preservation of, I like the idea of, but I think it ought to be expressly mentioned. The notion to sort of blend is not a bad word, or acknowledge the coexistence of housing and recreation.
Yeah, or I think I just think like our as we're thinking about what are we looking for in a project, I mean, it seems to me that the most competitive ones would, one aspect of that competitiveness would be like the way in which it integrates with the play between all of these things, right? Of the land conservation, the recreation, and the housing, right? And so developers that are really thoughtful about the integration of all three of those things would,
or higher.
So I think the way to do that, maybe just by signaling that goal or articulating that goal and the framing of the project. And then to the specific thing of like, so it just comes back to like the buildable areas, right? And then to your point, if there's something that comes up in a buildable area that just given the whole context of the entire property still doesn't feel right, then I think there's a time to have that conversation.
Yeah, does the term recreational, is that too vague? I mean, playing fields is pretty clear.
Yeah.
Much more specific than recreation, and the word integration might cover it, might give them the idea that, okay, we're going to have some recreation up there. We'd like to have it integrated with the housing.
Yeah, let's put this in the background part of it. And because I think if you require it and you say preservation or, integration of playing fields, again, you've identified where there's buildable areas. So you don't want to preclude somebody, from building out that buildable area, even though it is the flat area. That's one of the areas you've said is a buildable area. So it might send a mixed signal if you're trying to say preserve it, but this is a buildable area. So I think talking about the integration, talking about the coexistence in the context is going to be your strongest signal.
I mean, I think it's beyond the playing fields because we also have the pump track is going up there, right? So I think, I don't know. We can debate this all day, but I think put it in the background. I think it's really important to.
This won't be your last time to evaluate this.
yeah.
It's going to
Well,
come
and
back to you in draft, so you can look at it.
Yeah, a lot of things are happening up there that won't be happening when there's housing, disc golf and that sort of, all that
Yes,
stuff has
disc
got
golf
to
will be gone.
be reconsidered. But what about the indoor recreational facility? I mean, is that not a long-term plan of the city?
Well, that's on, and is that not on the other side in the area that's not being considered for development?
I believe so. It would be in the recreational area. So
Yeah, so that's not even on the table, it sounds like,
Okay.
from what this is,
okay.
right? So
Mhm.
I would say it doesn't need to be integrated by the developer, it's just off limits.
Okay.
I am running out of time here. We've got 2 minutes here. So I guess we'll pick this up tomorrow. If you haven't had a chance, because I did send this after the council meeting last night, to read through the rest of them. And if you have any follow-up thoughts between now and then, you're welcome to send them to me, especially if it was something you saw as your suggestion and it's in this list and you think now, actually, never mind, I've changed my mind. I'd like to rescind it. I can take it out because I'll know who was the one that wanted it or not. If you think there's something more you want to add, just send it to me and we can talk about it more tomorrow.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. In fact, I think it's the only option we have because otherwise we obviously won't get through this if we don't offer comment on this stuff, not to each other, but to you,
Me, yeah.
to then consolidate for tomorrow's meeting.
I'm going to resend you this document, the one we just did, and with its edits, so you can work from that one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that sounds good.
I'll make it a V2, and then you can just make edits as you want.
Does that sound good, everyone?
Sounds good.
Okay, great.
See you tomorrow at 8.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you.